This video is about how animals transport materials throughout their body, generally what is known as the circulatory system, which bridges the gaps between everything in your body. So the objectives of the unit are to describe the advantages offered by a closed circulatory system, as well as explaining what an open versus closed circulatory system is, and what the parts of the circulatory system are, and how each part shows evolution. So the open versus closed circulatory system is a very interesting feat, and it hugely depends on the size of the organism. We have the open circulatory system where there's no separation between blood and other intercellular fluid, and this is usually smaller animals like insects, crabs, and other arthropods. In the closed circulatory system, the blood is confined to vessels, which is what we have. And the blood is faster in a closed circulatory system than an open, and therefore it is more efficient. We have obviously the closed circulatory system, which is known as the cardiovascular system, and it is composed of the heart, blood vessels, and blood. This shows you a picture of each part. We have the whole picture on the left, and then on the right there's a picture of the heart, and on the bottom we have pictures of the blood vessels. We have a capillary and an artery and a vein, which we'll get into more detail later. There are three different blood vessels. There's arteries, which bring blood away from the heart, capillaries, which are the tiny small ones, and that is where the actual exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide occurs, and then veins that flow into the heart. And each one has slightly different structures, which actually show how structure follows function. This is a picture of an artery and a vein. The artery is on the left, the veins on the right. You'll notice there are a few major differences. The veins have these valves because by the time the blood is flowing back to the heart, it is going extremely slowly. So they need valves in order to stop backflow of the blood, because that would be extremely bad. The arteries have very elastic walls and very thick walls, and that's because as the heart pumps blood directly into the vessels, it is going at a very fast rate with lots of pressure. So they need to be able to be elastic and thick to withstand that pressure so they don't rupture. And capillaries have very, very small. Lastly, you'll notice that the capillaries have very, very thin walls in order for gas exchange to take place, because it occurs through osmosis and diffusion, so it needs to be very, very thin in order for those gases to move between the blood and the cells. Now if we look at how the blood actually flows through the circulatory system and how many chambers a heart has, we can see how structure again follows function and how the heart has evolved through time. So to start off with, the fish have two-chambered hearts and a one-loop system, meaning that the blood flows from the heart to the gills, to the body, and then back to the heart. Now this is very slow and not very efficient, but because the gills are so good at capturing the oxygen and getting rid of CO2, that it can still work for them. And they are also not very big, so they do not need an extremely efficient circulatory system. Now, amphibians and most reptiles have a three-chambered heart and a two-loop system. The two loops are the pulmonary and systemic loops, meaning that it goes from the heart to the lungs, which is the pulmonary, then back to the heart, and then back out to the body. This makes it a little more efficient, but because they only have three-chambered heart, there is some mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, as shown in the picture. The purple shows the mixing, and the red is the oxygenated, and the blue is the deoxygenated. So you'll notice that in the bottom chamber, known as the ventricle, there is some mixing. Now the most efficient way is with a four-chambered heart that mammals, birds, and crocodiles have. That is the reptile that does not have the three-chambered heart. They are extremely efficient with the four-chambered hearts because they have two atria and two completely separated ventricles. So therefore, deoxygenated and oxygenated blood never mix. Now this is due to a very high demand of oxygen for all of these animals. If you think mammals, like us, definitely need it because our lungs are not as efficient, and birds need such a great source of energy in order to fly all the time. And same with crocodiles, they are larger than most reptiles, so they need better circulatory systems. We also have a two-loop system, which are the pulmonary and systemic, same as the amphibians and reptiles, but because there's no mixing of the blood with the two ventricles, it makes it a lot more efficient. So it goes in a cycle, and again, with a cycle, you can actually start anywhere, but if you start in the left ventricle, the left always goes out towards your body. So it goes from the left ventricle through the aorta, which is your main artery, to your other arteries, so it branches off, and then to your capillaries where gas exchange actually takes place, then goes back through your veins and your vena cava, which is your main vein, kind of like the aorta of the arteries, and then into your right atrium, right ventricle, so your right side always has deoxygenated blood, and then out through your pulmonary artery to your lungs, and then back through your pulmonary vein into your left atrium so that the left ventricle can then pump it back out to the body. So if you look at the picture, the blue is showing deoxygenated blood and the red is showing oxygenated blood. Now, your blood is actually not blue, to clarify, but it does change slight colors when it becomes oxygenated. It becomes a bright red instead of more of maroon. But if you look at the picture, most of the time arteries have oxygenated blood because they're bringing blood from the heart out to the body. But there is one artery that has deoxygenated blood, and that would be the pulmonary artery, because it is bringing blood from the heart to the lungs so that it can get oxygen. In contrast to that, most veins have deoxygenated blood because they're bringing blood back to the heart from the body that it just gave up all its oxygen, except for the pulmonary vein, because the pulmonary vein is bringing blood from the lungs back to the heart. So it just got oxygen, so it is oxygenated blood. So those are the only two, vein and artery, to carry opposite types of blood. Now on to how it actually pumps through those systems by the cardiac cycle of the heart. But to break it down into three basic parts, the blood enters the atria from your veins, either the vena cava, which there are two of them, one from the top and one from the bottom, the superior and inferior vena cava, and they bring blood into your atria. When the blood comes in to the atria, because it comes in from both the pulmonary vein and the vena cava, so both arteries are filling up with blood, and they start to contract to force the blood into the ventricles. And when that happens, your ventricles are filling with blood and your atria relax to start to fill again, because you never want to not have blood in your heart, and that closes these valves. And the valves are very important because they stop, kind of like the ones in the veins, they stop backflow. So then the ventricles start to contract and force blood into the arteries, into the pulmonary artery and the aorta. And then when that's all done, the ventricles relax and the atria contract to push blood back into the ventricles. So basically at every moment, every part of your heart has blood in it, which keeps it a constant flow throughout your body, because you would not want parts of your body without blood at any point in time. That actually causes cell death. So this gives you the whole picture of when they're contracted versus relaxed. So you can give the entire picture. And this gives you the complete picture of the entire circulatory system and how everything flows through. We're going to be looking at this a little further and talking about blood pressure and more specifics on the blood vessels and the types of blood and the valves within the heart. But to give you a general idea of your circulatory system and how it functions, this will hopefully give you an idea.